Greetings to all and a warm welcome to our latest live webcast, Optimizing License Borrowing and Offline License Transfers. We're thrilled you've decided to join us for this enlightening masterclass. With each episode, we provide new highlights, technical tips, and success stories that will leave you inspired and ready to get your protection, licensing, and security techniques another step closer to perfection. At WIBU-SYSTEMS, we empower software publishers and intelligent device manufacturers with cutting-edge technologies, new business models, and tailor-made consulting training. Let us help you upgrade, optimize, and automate your entire license lifecycle management so you can focus on monetizing your business at a higher level. My name is Daniela Previtali, Global Marketing Director of WIBU-SYSTEMS, and I'm delighted to have you here with us today. We are joined by Rüdiger Kügler, VP Professional Services and Security Expert, and Jörg Jans, Professional Services, both from the headquarters of WIBU-SYSTEMS. To give you a roadmap for today's session, here is what we'll be covering. License borrowing enables temporary use of licenses without a constant server connection. Licenses can be borrowed from a local server or the cloud and stored in a CodeMeter container for offline use. Offline license transfers allow preloading of licenses onto a secure CodeMeter dongle and their distribution to devices without prior knowledge of specific assignments. CodeMeter License Central facilitates configuration, ensures security and flexibility, and streamlines offline transfers while safeguarding against loss or misuse. Before we dive into the content, let's quickly address a few housekeeping items. For all of you tuning in today, we set aside a special segment at the end of the session exclusively for Q&A. We warmly encourage you to drop your questions into the live chat box as they come to mind. If we can't get to your question during the live discussion, rest assured we'll make it a priority to engage with you individually at a later time to address your queries. This session is being recorded, and a link to the on-demand replay will be sent straight to your inbox within the next couple of days. This way, you can revisit the insights shared today at your leisure. And don't forget, stick around for the entire live session and seize the opportunity to win an invaluable 4 hours of personalized CodeMeter consultation with our industry-leading experts. As the webinar concludes, a new browser tab will automatically open, presenting you with a quick quiz. We'll randomly select a lucky winner from those who answer correctly and make the big announcement when we release the webinar replay. Kindly note that if you win, you'll be ineligible for any other prize draws we host in 2025. Be also aware that this brief questionnaire includes additional questions aimed at gauging the quality of this masterclass. While these questions are optional, your valuable feedback will empower us to enhance the quality of our offerings and tailor our online events more precisely to meet your specific needs. And now, without any more delay, I'm delighted to hand over the reins to Rüdiger. The stage is all yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for this introduction. My name is Rüdiger Kügler, and together with my colleague Jörg Jans, we will show you in the next 50 to 60 minutes about how to transfer licenses offline, to borrow licenses, and to move licenses. Before we begin with this webinar, this is part 4 of a series of 5 webinars about CodeMeter License Central. And Jörg, let's start with a short recap of the first 3 parts.
Yes, a warm welcome from my side as well. And in the first part of this series, we took a look at the basic settings, how to import and configure a film code, do the global settings for license creation and support processes, and set up the container types, which defines the place where the license can be transferred to from CodeMeter License Central to the end users' systems. In the second part of the series, we took a look at the CodeMeter License Central items. We showed you the product item options, picked some which are very important for most of the business models and license models. Then we took a look at the license models. And in the third part, Rüdiger, we did
feature-based licenses. And the feature-based licenses, we showed you that there are two different options. One option is to use bundles to realize features. The other thing is module items. And today we will dive once again into module items when it comes to offline transfer, to borrowing, and to move licenses. By the way, Jörg, you said we had the global settings in the first part, and I think we will come back to the global settings today because two of the settings are relevant for the license transfer.
Yeah, we will do a recap of those two settings and take a look into global settings again.
Okay, let's continue with the use cases and find out why and when do we need offline license transfer. We had two use cases in mind when we implemented the license transfer. The first was borrowing. So borrowing, the use case is you sell your software to a customer as a floating network license. So let's assume you have a customer which has 15 employees and 10 of them should work with your software in parallel. So you give them a 10 user floating network license. Usually they install this on a license server. There could be a dongle, there could be a cloud container. There could be a CMX license on the license server, and then they use this inside of their local network. The world has changed in the last couple of years, and people are used to work from home or working mobile. And so if a user now needs the software in his home office, mobile office, then there's still the option to use the floating network server. He needs a VPN connection to the to the network in the company, and then via a VPN connection, it's possible to use the license even from mobile office or from his home office. There are use cases where the mobile office is offline, or there are use cases where the user is on site visiting a customer. Maybe it's a construction site with no internet connection. And for this use case, the idea is to borrow a license before you leave the office, or as long as you're in the VPN, you borrow a license to your local device. Typically, it's then put on your local machine in a CMX license, but it can also be, of course, a dongle. And then the user can use the license offline for a couple of minutes, hours, days. And for the borrowing, this is something where you borrow it for an amount of time. After this amount of time, it switches automatically back, is available once again on the license server and expired on the local machine. Of course, you can return the license earlier. The second use case that we had in mind, we call this moving licenses. It's a permanent end-to-end transfer. The borrowing is a temporary transfer, and the moving licenses, the idea is there's a plant, and the field engineer should activate licenses inside the plant. And if you want to do this with the normal process, the field engineer needs to create a RAG file in the plant, needs to go to a place where he has online connection, gets the update file, gets the update file, and then needs to go back to the plant, import the update file, and then create a receipt file and send the receipt file back to License Central. So it's just the three-step communication. The idea of this moving licenses, the field engineer can put already a few licenses on his device. Usually this could be a CodeMeter dongle. And then he takes the licenses with this device into the plant. And then he moves the license from the CodeMeter dongle to the target device. Either he connects the dongle with the target device, or he connects his laptop with the target device and then moves the licenses from his dongle to the target device. The result of this is that, of course, the CodeMeter License Central does no longer accurately know where is the license or where are the licenses. There are a few things how to localize the licenses with some restrictions. We will come back to these restrictions like transfer depth and so on later in the presentation.
So now let's take a look at the processes that are done with the license borrowing. As always in the CodeMeter universe, it starts with CodeMeter License Central. You have your back office integration, usually creating licenses automatically, and therefore you want to use the same processes for license transfer, licenses, borrowing licenses, as you use with all other licenses as well. So you create an order, you need to send out a ticket to the user, and from that point on, you are out of the game. Everything else is done on the user side, end user side. Usually some administrator activates the licenses from the provided ticket to a network license server. By the way, all the licenses for license transfer needs a license quantity. Therefore, it's the logical choice of use that you use a license server, and that was the initial use cases we had in mind. And of course, you have the computer of the end user who wants to work offline. So let's take a look what happens. So administrator activates the license to the network license server. And then locally, without any doing of you, the user can borrow one of those licenses from the network server to his local system, either as a CMX license or a CM dongle. That we will show you later. That's up to you what is allowed. And he can either return the license actively back to the network server if he comes back to the office earlier, or if the borrowing time is over, it will be returned automatically to the network server. And of course, you would have the option to deactivate the licenses back to CodeMeter License Central, for example, if you want to exchange your network server or something like that. But that is usually an edge case which doesn't happen that often. In our terms, the first part, transferring the licenses from CodeMeter License Central to the end user, the network server, is called license activation. And the local part, which is done without your doing, is the license transfer. And you see in this last slide, license transfer is completely offline, completely without CodeMeter License Central. Everything happens on end user side or your customer side, which means, on the other hand, that you need to provide some tooling to do that borrowing, either within your software or as a special tool.
I assume, Jörg, that we will show this tooling, and I assume also that we have samples that the software developer can use to create his own tooling. Is this correct?
Yes, together with the SDK, we install a quite major sample which is able to show all the options of the license transfer, and that is something you could use with slight adaptations in your software as well.
Okay, then let's take a look at the license move, and you will guess it already that the workflows are very similar. So we have License Central on the left-hand side. We have the end user. In this case, I would call this the transport media, which is the CodeMeter dongle. And on the target computer, we have either a dongle or a CMX license. If you're asking yourself why we don't have a CM cloud container on the target device, cloud container is something where you need an online connection, and we speak here of offline use cases. That's why this doesn't fit together. Okay, we have the activation, so a license gets activated to the transport medium. Then we have to move from the transport medium to the target device. And we recommend not to implement the return. So this is something that you can configure if return is allowed or not. And if you don't allow the return, then there is only the option that the license is either still in the transport media or the license is already on the target device. But if it is on the target device, it will stay on the target device. And so there is some information written back to the transport dongle, which can be analyzed later so that you are now sure where is my license. If you allow returning, then you will never find the license once again. But technically, all options are possible. There's also the option to deactivate the license and to return them to License Central. But also here, the recommendation is not to allow the deactivation. And as Jörg mentioned, We call the first step the license activation, the second step, the offline step, the license transfer, just to distinguish in our material. This is just a WIBU definition. So, and as mentioned already from Jörg, also the offline license transfer, the license transfer takes part completely offline.
So now let's do a more technical look at the license transfer, and we have those cases. We have those two use cases, and we call the corresponding technical realization transfer types. The first one for borrowing licenses is borrow local license. It's really called that way and it's spelled that way, and you need to take care that it is camel case. And with this borrowing of the licenses, if you do this, a borrowed license is on the network server displayed as allocated. So if we stick to our sample, we have a network license with 10 seats. If you borrow one, 9 are available and 1 is displayed as allocated, but the license quantity itself is still 10. The license on the target system is always a single local license. So even if you have a network server with a network license, the borrowed license is always a local license. That may bring problems if you borrow a license to a terminal server session or client, because their CodeMeter needs by default a network license. On the other hand, it's not that use case, because if you work with a terminal server, you usually have some VPN connection to the office, and therefore you could use the server as well. But we stumbled over that problem in one of our projects. And if the borrowing time is expired, the license is automatically reverted to the server. That means from that on, it's no longer displayed as allocated. And if there wasn't an active returning of the license in the client will just display it as expired. Moving licenses is then called move licenses as a transfer type. And in contrary to the borrowing, in this case, the license quantity in the original transfer medium is really split. So if you transfer 1 or more licenses, that amount of transferred licenses will remove from the license quantity on the target and will then be transferred to the target container. So the target container has the license quantity that is removed from the sender. But the balance overall will remain on the original CM container. And you have the option to return the license to the same container, but as Rüdiger said, we usually don't recommend to do this. But if you have the original CM sender container still at hand, you could return the moved license, and then the quantity is merged back into the original product code, and there the license quantity is increased again.
If you also take a look at the technical implementation. So by transferring a license, all product item options are transferred from the original container to the target container. So this means that the license is transferred completely. Doesn't matter if it is borrowed or if it is moved. All options are copied, even a unit counter. So that means if there is a license with a unit counter and a license quantity of 2, and you move the license, then the unit counter is copied. And so let's assume you have a unit count of 10 on the sender, then you have also of 10 on the recipient, on the target, and you still have 10 on the sender. So there is no automatic handling of the unit counter. Every option is copied, including the unit counter. There's only a special handling for the license quantity. In terms of the borrowing, the license quantity is not changed on the sender side, but the license is marked as allocated, and on the target device, the license quantity is 1 local. In the case of this permanent move, the license quantity gets split. So usually you split it into 1 and the rest, but of course you could also split the 10 user license in 3 and 7, but the usual use case is 1 and 9. So then the license quantity remains, and there is a special handling of module items. So I told you at the beginning we will come back to module items. So if you have a module item, the module item will be, or the parent item will be transferred, including all the modules. So you cannot just pull them apart. So one parent item is transferred, including all its modules. The license quantity of the parent is split with this automatically handling. And if there is no license quantity set in the module, so in the children, then this is an inherited license quantity. So it inherits the license quantity from the parent. And in this case, of course, it's automatically split because we only split the one in the parent and it's inherited in all the children. And so if we have a move license of 10, then the target device, we have 1, and then of course all the children can also be used 1, and the remaining are 9 for all the children on the server. There's an option to override the license quantity, and use cases are you want to control the amount of data points, amount of access that you can control. So instead of counting parallel usage of the software, there are some elements that you want to count inside the software, for example, access of a controller. And in this case, you would put this as an overwritten field, and then, of course, it is copied and not split. And so if in a children, the license quantity is overwritten, then this license quantity is copied. And so only the license quantity in single items and in the parent item has this special handling.
So that was a lot of theory, and I think it's time for a demo. As we already teased in the review, the first thing we want to take a look at is the global settings, because there are 2 settings that are relevant for license transfer. The first one is license shortage on license borrowing allowed. Take the case you have a network server, and that network server has borrowed licenses. So, and now you need to rehost the licenses to another server. So what to do with the borrowed license? If you say, I don't allow license shortage, you can't return the license from the network server to CodeMeter License Center. You need to wait until the license period is done. If you allow a license shortened, you can return the license to CodeMeter License Center. And then for a short period in time, there is more than 1 or more than the 10 licenses, because the amount of borrowed licenses at that point is still available in the field. That was the setting for borrowing. The second one is the allowing of license move. As we already mentioned, it's a very special use case, and it's a very small field of customers on our side which has use for this feature, and therefore they need to activate it actively, that they want to allow license move. And if you switch this on, there pops up a second setting, allow transfer depth larger than 1. Rüdiger only explained the process from transferring from the transfer medium to the endpoint. But if you say the transfer depth is larger than 1, you can define so-called intermediate targets, and from such an intermediate target, you could transfer further. So you can transfer from a dongle to the end system. And that is something we strongly try to avoid, because then you lose the knowledge of where your licenses are completely. So our recommendation is always, if you want to use license move, stick to transfer depth of 1 and don't allow the return of the licenses. But those are the 2 global settings you can define, and keep in mind those settings all only take effect for new licenses. So the current one will not be movable if you allow it later on.
Okay, and with this, I want to save the setting. And then I think we can have a short look to the container types. We are using a standard installation with a CMAC license, a cloud container, in this case in Europe, and a CodeMeter dongle. And let's take a look at the transfer type schemes. And there is already one transfer type scheme, which is the borrow license.
Yeah, we use here a regular demo CodeMeter License Central, and there we have one predefined transfer type schema, and this is for borrowing. And you see there is one setting that you must set: max borrowing period. So you define how many days a license can be borrowed in maximum. There is some limit for the different container types. So there is beside of the one that you define, another one that we define. I think something around a year for dongle, half a year. I'm not even sure, because in all our projects we say don't use a license period or a borrowing period too long, because take the scenario: someone borrows the license for a year and then his computer crashes. Then you have immediately a support process that you need to handle with a new license or somehow else. And then therefore don't do that. If someone needs the license that long, it's easier to issue a CMAC license, which is permanently on that system for that amount of time. So borrowing is usually meant for a short period, 2 weeks on a offshore plant and no internet access, and therefore keep it small. The second one is an interesting one, the transfer parameter. Firm item must exist, and I think Rüdiger is quite keen to explain this.
Definitely. The firm item must exist. There are two stories about this. One story is about the licensing between you and us, and the other story is about how you want to control the borrowing for your customers. Let's start with you and us. WIBU-SYSTEMS offers different license models. Of course, we want to earn money with our product CodeMeter. And one license option is a license per container. The other option is we call this an unlimited license, which is an annual flat fee, and then you can create as many containers licenses as you want. If you speak of this unlimited license, then you can create as many containers as you want, as explained. And of course, in this case, you can create new containers, target devices out of the blue, out of thin air, so you can simply create them. We don't count them, everything is fine. And in this case, you can decide if you check this or if you don't check this. So if you don't check it, then during the transfer, the target device is created automatically. If you decide to go for the license per container, of course, we earn our money on the base of containers that you create. And then, of course, you need first to create an activated container on the target device. And in this case, we can use this to count the amount of created containers. So if you have the license per container, then you need to check the firm item must exist. So this is a part of the story between you and WIBU. The other part is if you say firm item must exist, then there is a process you need to implement so that the user needs to register his target device. So that means you know all the target devices. All the target devices are available in CodeMeter License Central. You know them. You can create push updates for them. If you don't check this, you potentially don't know all the target devices, and the user can use it on any computer. And so I have customers who are saying, I want to know the target devices, I want to control them, I want to have some quota on it so that one user can create only 100 target devices or something like this. And so this option has two implications. One is the licensing between you and us, and the other one is you want to know the target devices or you don't care about.
Yeah, and the last setting we need to do in the transfer type schema is to define the targets, and there you can choose one or more containers of the defined container types in your system. We usually say we use CM Act license and CM dongle as potential targets because CM Cloud Container doesn't really make sense to do an offline licensing or an offline transfer in a container type that needs a permanent online connection. So, and now we have the transfer type schema for borrowing that was already there. For the move demo, we need a second one. And there we need to define a name and select the transfer type move license. And now you see we have slightly different settings. We have the transfer depth, which is in correlation to the global setting. So if you don't allow a transfer depth larger than 1, it doesn't make sense to enter there 2 or 3. I assume you can't save it that way. And therefore, you have this limitation to 1 if you don't allow a larger transfer depth. We have the firm item as with the borrow, and Rüdiger already explained this. So the same conditions here. And then we have one setting may be returned. With that, you can define if you want to allow actively returning the licenses from the target back to the center. And we already mentioned it, you can only return it to the same sender. And therefore, our recommendation is don't activate this. And then there is a third parameter may be pulled, but that was never be implemented and shouldn't be even be shown there.
But you see it.
You see it.
So don't forget.
Yeah, and then same as with the borrowing, you define the transfer type targets. And if you allow a depth larger than 1, there would be a checkbox behind those container types. Save it. Just to show you what will happen. So in the move license, if you then go to 2, you see there you can define for every single target if it is an intermediate target. So for example, for the dongle, you could say, I allow further moving of the licenses, but not for the CM Act licenses. In this case, CM Act license would always be the endpoint of a transfer, and a dongle would be an intermediate medium. But we stick to our recommendation to don't do something like this. Stay to transfer depth 1, don't allow return, and this would make your processes easier on the long run from our experience.
Yeah, just a few words on the security part of this. When we create a license, there are 2 keys. One key is the licenser private key, and this is the key with which we will sign the content of the license. This licenser private key resists only in the HSM, the high security module, or we call this our firm security box on the license central side. And with this, we sign this is the content of the license. There's a second key, the licenser transfer key, and this is used to sign the combination of the binding and this license, and in case of a license which cannot be moved or borrowed. A licenser private key, licenser transfer key are in License Central, stay in License Central, they stay in the high security module in License Central, so not even in the memory, and they are there, they will not be copied to the end user. If you say we allow borrowing or we allow move, then the licenser private key still stays in License Central and only the transfer key will be transferred. The transfer key will not be transferred to any endpoint. It will only be transferred to the sender or to any intermediate. So and that's why if you say authorize further transfer with the dongle, then this means that the transfer key will be transferred to the dongle, but the transfer key in this case would not be transferred to the CM Act license, which has a lower security profile than the CodeMeter dongle. So, and that's why it makes sense to say For dongles, I'm allowing this, and for CMX licenses, I don't allow this. We will come back when we configure our move license at all, because here we also have the recommendation allow only the CodeMeter dongle as an intermediate target. But let's go back to the recommendations of Jörg, transfer depth once, and we allow all targets.
Yeah, now we have defined the transfer type schemas, and now we can go to the items. Not every item is per default transferable, so you need to define the used transfer type schema per item. So you can say I have usually no license transfer for my items, but those selected items are transferable. And you see, you need to select one of your predefined transfer schemas. And it's only one. You can't define a license that is borrowable and movable. So it's either or. And we have one default item in our demo license central, which we call floating users borrow. You see that we have a license quantity that is set on order. And I mentioned it before, for every item you want to do license transfer, you need a license quantity. If you define something with a license transfer schema, but without license quantity, CodeMeter License Central will say, no, I can't save this. There is the license quantity missing. So that was the borrow license. And because I already mentioned moving is not the main process for us, we don't have one there, so we just duplicate the first one. Maybe you should change the product text to have a distinction in the container.
Yeah.
And same product code, same rest. And interesting point is the container types, because there we would recommend to only allow a dongle. From our point of view, the only logical transfer medium is a CM dongle. Cloud is no option at all. And a CM Act container, because of the lesser security, as Rüdiger explained, isn't the best choice to use it as a transfer medium. And therefore, our recommendation would be, if you do a license or movable licenses, allow only activation to a CM dongle. So now we have the items transferred, and we are ready to go to step into our automation. So our back office system, Rüdiger, now creates automatically some orders. And we stick to the 10 because somehow always the 10 is the number of choice. And you see Rüdiger now creates one ticket containing multiple licenses. That's not really the way we do it nowadays. We usually do one license per ticket, or the other way around, one ticket per license. And for sake of the demo, it's easier to do it this way. And now Rüdiger pulls on the customer head.
So now we can activate the license on the user side. And so I enter the ticket. And as Jörg explained, the typical use case would be have one or two tickets for the two different licenses, or typically I have only one license type. For the demo, we use both. And we see I have a borrow license, I have a move license with different features. When I click on Activate License, I can choose the target container. And if I'm choosing the dongle, I will see both. We come back to this later. And if I'm choosing Cloud or CM Act, then we will see that I can activate the license only the borrow license, because the move license does not support this binding type. So let's go back. We recommend to use the dongle. That's why I select the dongle here. You see in the dongle we can activate both. I have already a dongle connected to my computer, CM dongle for webinar. And here the dongle is currently completely empty. I used a fresh dongle this morning, Jörg. And when I click on Activate Selected License Now, this now does this three-step communication in the background. So it creates the RAC file, remote activation context file from the dongle, then sends it to License Central. License Central finds out, oh, it's a fresh dongle. I need to create a firm item. By the way, if you license per container, this is the time when it counts to create the creation of the firm item. Then it creates the first product item, it creates the second product item, and then the update file is delivered to the dongle. And if we now refresh the dongle page, we will see that we have now the two licenses, the move license with all the features and the borrow license with the features I selected during the sales process.
Yeah, and what we see as well is this O. And this O displays in the overview page that there are transfer options attached to this product code. And if we go into the product item details, we see the exact license transfer options, the pulling allowed, the returning allowed, the type of the license, the maximum transfer depth. Unfortunately, not the maximum borrow period for the borrow licenses. There's always the depth one, but maybe that will be done in one of the future releases. And now we can do the second demo with the moving or the borrowing, the license transfer itself. And therefore, as we mentioned, there is a sample. It's called License Manager. It's a regular part of the SDK installation. And there you need to do some settings in the configuration file. It's a standard C# application, an old Windows form and .NET framework. And therefore we have this license manager.exe.config. And there you need to do at least your product code. Usually it's 6.010 with our demo because it's the SDK version. And then you can define the time units for the borrow. Usually we use seconds for demos because it's easier to show all the use cases. But in a productive environment, you would, of course, not borrow in seconds, but in days. And there is one special setting for the offline creation of CM containers. Usually you bundle a license information file together with the license manager, which describes your CM Act container type. So you need to add the CM Act ID as a key and the name of the file. And we already prepared this for the CodeMeter License Center Rüdiger users. And with that set, we are ready to go. So if we start this application, we see that Rüdiger seems to have some error in his config. That's funny because it wasn't changed. I think that's something we take a look at later on. It seems to work because
firm code is wrong. Second.
Never touch a running system.
Never touch a running system. Yeah. Okay, we were able to fix it.
Yeah, but he will never forget this.
Yeah.
So, and if we now start the application, all the licenses that are available are scanned. You have either the ones from your local system, but you can show also those on a remote server. Being in the WIBU network, we should find something somewhere here in the network. But for the demo, we stick to the dongle that Rüdiger prepared. And there we see our two licenses, the borrow license and the move license. And now let's do the first. We see that borrow is possible. And due to the fact that we defined two possible borrow targets with the dongle and the CM Act container, this demo recognizes there is no fitting CM Act container and allows us to create a new one. And now Rüdiger chooses a borrow time that is quite short to show the automatically return. In the background now, similar steps like with the activation are done. So it's also a three-step mechanism with context and update and receipt. So we stick to the same mechanisms that have already been established. And now you see in the borrow sender that we have a total of 10 licenses.
So
one is borrowed,
still
9
10.
are free, and the borrowed one is displayed as used. And the borrowed license itself is a new container, has a total of 1, has an expiration time because the borrow period is calculated based on the seconds we entered. And if we now refresh this page, the 20 seconds should be done. And we see the borrowed one has been returned automatically in the meantime. So the local copy of the borrowed license is expired. And in the sender, we have still our total of 10, but borrowed is now 0 and used is 0. So this is the automatic return of the borrow.
We can also borrow, and the return is automatically, or not automatically, manually. So I borrow a license for 1 hour. So now the license is borrowed for 1 hour. Let's give him a second. So, and of course, I can now say return license, and then I can return the license even before the 1 hour expires.
Yeah, and you may have noticed with the second borrow operation, the expired license has been cleaned up in the background. That's something that demo does automatically. So with every borrow or license transfer operation, a cleanup of old transfers will be done. Rüdiger, can you go to the web admin? Or move something first, and then we go to the web admin. So let's do the license move. It's the same as with the borrow. Now we already have a CM Act license container, so the suggestions to create a new one is not there, and we don't have anything to set up. We just move the license to that target container. And now you see in the sender that the quantity is really decreased from 10 to 9. There is nothing borrowed, there's nothing used, the license is just gone, and it shows up in the move target. And now let's go to web admin. Because there happens something both in the sender and in the target. The sender gets a history. And in this history, you see exactly the status of the license transfer, the target container, when has it been done, what's the name of the client, so some additional information. And this history may be cleaned up if you have many operations, but you can only clean up finalized history entries. Like we see here, finalized means the transfer has been returned. And because Rüdiger borrowed 2 licenses and returned both of those entries are finalized, and those could be cleaned up. And if we take a look in the move target in the CM Act license, there should be a history as well.
Give me a second. Move target here. Da.
Yeah. So there we don't have a history, but we have a license license transfer options object. And there we see from where we received this license, what was the transfer type. So we know always exactly where a license has been transferred to, and in the target where it came from. And with this knowledge and a little bit of programming, we could gather all the information if needed. But keep in mind, everything is offline, so you need to do it on your side.
Yeah, and returning is not allowed. Of course, it would be easy to say if I'm clicking on this moving target that we disable the button return license, but then you might ask yourself, oh, it's just disabling a button. What if the user creates its own application? And that's why we just want to show what happens. And then we get the error from CodeMeter runtime that there is no permission to return the license. Of course, this is something, if you would use this license manager for your own purpose, you would already disable the button. But even if the button would be enabled or the user would create anything from himself or then the button would definitely not work because it's a setting inside of CodeMeter runtime. I just have a question, Jörg. I saw that there's also the use of a context of a remote container. So that means, let's assume I'm no longer in the VPN. So we have a borrowing license and I already left the company. The VPN connection fails because I don't have VPN at all. And so I want to borrow a license. Then is it possible that who is on site, I can create a context file from my target container, send it to you as administrator, and you could use my context file to do the borrowing here and send the update file via email?
Exactly.
Cool.
Nothing more to say. So
Cool.
you create a context and we could do an offline transfer.
An offline transfer.
Offline
I really like this work.
If you cancel this dialog, there's a second one in the file menu. There is then, on the one hand, the option to create such a context file, and on the other hand, then to import the update file. So you could use this license transfer demo tool on the other side as well. So the one is for the remote activation from CodeMeter License Central. That's a typical context file, and the other one is a license transfer context file. Yeah, and that's this demo.
Yeah. By the way, it also shows all connected containers to this server and all the other servers. And here in this case, we see which are the servers and which containers with my firm code. So it only shows containers with my firm code. If I would switch to another firm code, I would see more containers, and it also shows me the local license server. So it's more than just this small demo.
But speaking of firm code, is a good situation to pop in a question that I got here in the questions. The question is license transfer only available for universal firm code?
Short answer, yes. Long answer, there is also a license borrowing, not a move, a license borrowing for the old CM dongle 100,000 and old CM Act license 5 million firm codes. But this old borrowing works in a different way. In this case, you needed to, similar like to firm item must be exist, you need to activate the license on both sides, so on the sender and on the target. And then you can simply switch where is the license currently active. So we had, let's say, one sender with 10 licenses, and then you have 20 targets, and you need to activate all the 21 computers. And then you can switch one license from the sender to one target, switch them back. So it's just switching of license between known locations, and license borrowing is more flexible with the universal firm code, especially if you have this unlimited license and you can create containers freely. And the move license is something which is only available for this universal firm code, also because of this creating containers on the fly, which is exactly the use case for this offline plans.
So the recommendation would be, if you want to go into this license transfer mechanisms and are still with the old CM Act or CM dongle firm code in your software, then you should think about switching to universal firm code. Okay, that has been the two demos. It was not a pure CodeMeter License Central webinar today. We did some CodeMeter stuff as well, but most of the settings are done on CodeMeter License Central side, and we just showed you how to use this afterwards. Now let's take a look at some false friends or best practices. One thing is using of bundles. We always mention if you want to use license transfer, use module items, because as we showed, when doing the license transfer, you only need to operate on the parent, and all the attached children modules are transferred automatically. If you use a bundle, license transfer would be possible as well, but the bundle is split up during the activation process, and then you have separate items in the container. You don't know how they ended up there, and if you then need to do some transfer, your application needs many knowledge about how to transfer the single product items, and therefore our recommendation, use module items.
Yeah, another false trend, license quantity in modules, so overwritten license quantities in the child elements. Make sure it fits your use case is what we wrote here. So I told you use case like the amount of data points, the amount of access which are controlled by the software. Here in this case, it works very well. But the use case, I have 10 licenses of the basic feature and I have only 9 licenses of this sub feature. And in this case, what is your expectation? Should it borrow one basic feature plus one sub feature, or we have only 9 sub features? And that's why we say, hey, if it is overwritten, we will simply copy the value. And so make sure if you're using overwritten values in license quantity, make sure it fits your use case.
Yeah, the next for friends I would even call enemy, because I'm not aware of any use case where a unit counter in combination with offline license transfer would do any good. So our recommendation is clearly don't combine unit counter and license transfer.
Yeah, the move depth larger than 1, we already explained. We say try to avoid this. You lose control. You can no longer find out where is the license. In case of transfer depth of 1, you can at least say you need to send me frequently a context file of the intermediate dongle, and then we get the information where is the license really located. But if this is larger than 1, then there's no chance.
Yeah, when it comes to a CM-ACT license as a transfer medium, it's technically possible, and as Rüdiger explained, it's less secure than a CM dongle, and therefore we recommend not to do this. Even if it is possible, just use a CM dongle.
Yeah, and last but not least, I already explained this. If you have a license per container, then you need to pre-activate the target devices. That's why if you want to use the full features and advantages of the offline license transfer, buy a unlimited license with your sales representative or from your sales representative. Yeah, I told you that this is part 4 of our series, and Jürgen and I plan to have a last and 5th part where we speak about the support processes. Maybe Jürgen, a short teaser for the next webinar.
Yeah, we take a look at what to do if the customer comes around and say, I lost my licenses. What do you have as options there? We take a look at blacklisting of CM container, what you can do, what happens there, what to do with open transfers, the legendary unexpected state of CodeMeter License Central, how it can happen and what to do best against it. And last but not least, recycling of CM containers, what this is good for. So those are the topics we are looking at the last part of CodeMeter License Central.
There are a lot of questions already in the chat. I just want to go through them. I think that most of them are already answered. The question with the universal firm code, yes, it only works, or it works best with universal firm code, old firm code with a lot of restrictions. Can I borrow a license using RAG and RAW mechanisms? Yes, we explained. I think we saw this question in the chat. That's why I just said, Jörg, can you explain this? Is it possible to use a CM-ACT license as an intermediate? Yes, possible, but from the security, we don't recommend this. Does it work on a terminal server? As Jörg said, terminal server, you need a network license, and so, but the terminal server is not a typical use case of this offline borrowing. Offline borrowing, you want to borrow a license to your local machine and not to a terminal server. If you want to use it on a terminal server, activate the license server on the terminal server. Can I borrow a license to a cloud container? Yeah, similar. Cloud container needs to be online, currently permanently, with the cache maybe in the future, not permanently, but the idea of the offline transfer is to use it offline, so the use cases doesn't match. Can I activate a move license into cloud? No, not possible. Can I rehost my server while licenses are borrowed? As Jörg explained, there is this feature of the license shortage. And the license shortage allows that you can deactivate or not deactivate while licenses are borrowed. The activation can only be taken if all the licenses are back. So there's a feature request that licenses can also be activated already previous, so allowing an overusage. Currently, this is not implemented. So if you would like to have this feature, send an email to our product manager so that he can prioritize this feature. And last but not least, and this is a very interesting question, can I move licenses in the circle? So maybe from A to B to C and back to A.
Oh yes, that's my favorite. Technically it works, but you need to allow a transfer depth larger than 1. In this case, at least 3. And as you remember, we don't recommend to do this. But if you go down that road, yes, it works. You can transfer from A to B. If B is an intermediate target type, you can transfer further to C. And if this is intermediate as well, you can transfer back to A. You remember when I said returning the license to the same container, if returning is activated, sums up the license quantity again. So it's merged back. But in this case, from C to A is just a transfer. So in this case, you would end up with 2 product item entries in your CM container. And usually that's not what the intention of such a circular moving, and therefore try to avoid it, stick to our recommendation, do not allow return, and transfer depth 1. So that have been, no, there is one additional one. You explained that license move is offline, but can a completed move be reported back to CLC so it knows in which containers a license resides now?
This is a very good question. There is a feature request to exactly implement this, and as mentioned, with the allowing the overusage, send an email to us and we will forward this to the product manager to put higher priority on this case. So this is a really good feature. I would definitely love to have it, but it's currently on the planning board and it's not implemented yet.
So, and now we have answered all questions. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And hope to see you with the 5th part. And maybe in 20 years, we do episode 6, 7, 8, and 9, like with Star Wars in former times. See you, have a nice day, and see you maybe in some of the projects. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.